Thank you very much for joining me this morning, for giving up some time on what I'm sure is a very busy Sunday for you. I will do my utmost to make it worth your while. And if it is about your child's education and being, if you like, better informed about how to support your child's learning, then I believe you're going to get very good value from your investment of time today. It is 11 plus education for parents. Most parents don't seem to realize just how much their own education matters, and they make a mistake. That is a mistake. And I'm glad you're not amongst that group, because you are here today. I am Sir Tailor, and I will be presenting this whole thing in person right now. So the first question, which I have to address before you even come, is why are you here? And I have to make an assumption about that. I have to assume that it is because you want to do your best for your children. And the entire presentation is based on that assumption. So if that's not why you're here, I'm sorry, but you have the rest of your Sunday free. Now, one of the messages that I sent out in order to encourage people to attend is asking questions like, you know, if you are worried about your child's education, then there are some questions you can ask yourself. And these are the questions. 1, do you equate schooling and education? Do you measure educational success in grades, points, scores, and awards? Are you aware of making important decisions using shaky criteria? Are you an asset or an obstacle to your child's education? And do you see a connection between the above questions? Now, as I go through my presentation, I think that the answers for most, if not all, of these questions will become obvious to you. In any case, right towards the end of my presentation, I'll come back to these questions and make the answers explicit, or the significance of the questions at least explicit. Which brings us to the next thing, is why am I here? Well, I don't claim to be the fount of all knowledge about 11 plus and education, but most people would say that I am an expert in preparing children for 11 plus. And I'm here to share my expertise, whatever expertise I have, and insights with you in order to empower you to make better choices for yourselves and your children. So I'm saying you have to give yourself a chance, because I am going to share important insights which I myself wish I had had when my daughters were in primary school. And some of the insights that I share might sting at first, meaning to say you might not like them, or they might jar against something you already thought you knew. But I ask you in those circumstances to reflect objectively, and your children might reap the rewards. So give it some time to sink in, and then you may have the opportunity to make better choices for your children. Now, number one really valuable lesson for yourself, but probably even more so for your child, is that you are not your feelings. I'm going to play this first clip from YouTube.
It's also important to remember that you are not your feelings. One of the most important things that you can learn from this book, and more importantly for life, is that you are not your feelings. Your feelings are there to give you an example of how you could react, but that doesn't mean you have to act in that way. So remember, you do not have to act on your feelings. When you understand that your feelings are just suggestions for how you could act in a situation and not what you have to do, you will become unstoppable.
Very simple message. You are not your feelings. Now, that is actually a really important message for your child, because never mind adults being driven by emotions, which we all are from time to time. None of us is immune to that. But we try to put them to one side, put them into perspective, and make important decisions more logically. But children are more prone to identifying with their own emotions and reacting and making choices with their emotions. So if you can help your child to understand that their feelings are just events taking place in their bodies, their feelings are not who they are, then that can help them to make better choices. Why should you heed me, even if you don't like what I say? Well, You don't have to, but the opportunity is there. I am motivated to educate and not by profit. For example, we teach in small groups. So our live lessons take place in small groups. And because of this, the learning is highly effective, but it is no good for making profits. So in other words, we don't actually run for profit. We try to break even. And we teach in small groups because that is best for education. I can therefore tell you what you need to know in order to make better choices. I'm not trying to bamboozle you or sell you anything. Well, okay, since I'm going to tell you quite a lot, you ought to know something about me. So who is Sir Tailor? Well, my name is actually Sudhir. I'm an immigrant. I was born in Kenya and spent some time in India, and then I've been in this country since I was 7 years old. I am dad to 2 girls, and a lot of what I tell you is not just coming from my background as an educator, but also as a dad. I always feel compelled to prove that I am a father to 2 girls. There they are, Kavita on the left, Nilam on the right, and they're both in their 20s now. I have been in the world of education, that is on the giving side of it, since 1985. And within that time, I've spent 10 years within the Royal Navy training sailors and officers. So teacher and trainer since 1985. I've taught my own 11+ course since 2001. So we had our 20th anniversary in April. And I have not kept account of, throughout my teaching career, how many people I have taught, but I've estimated that it's somewhere between 10 and 20,000. And now I believe it's closer to the 20,000 mark. And most importantly, I feel that I try to do my bit to make the world a better place for all of us and our children. So this is me in the nutshell. And that's where I'm coming from. And you may have gathered, I am driven by something other than money. I am driven by a vision, and this is the vision that I am driven by: to empower people like you by enhancing their love of and skills in learning and reasoning. So when I say people like you, I mean your children too. I am a teacher. I believe in the power of education to improve the world and people's lives. So this is the value or vision of a teacher. So first, a rhetorical question. Are you serious about doing the best for your child? Now I know you are, because you're here. It's all those millions of people who could have been here but aren't. They're the ones who maybe they're not that serious, but I know you are. Now I'm going to say a quick anecdote, very quick. Carl Sagan was a scientist. He was a cosmologist. He was world-renowned. He was the leading authority in his life on the search for extraterrestrial life. And his opinion was very much sought after on anything related to that. So he was often asked the question, are we alone in the universe? In other words, are human beings the only, or is this planet the only place with life on it? Or is there life in other parts of the universe? So he would get that question all the time. And his answer would always be the thinking man's answer, the scientist's answer, that I can't say because the evidence is not in one way or the other. In other words, we have no evidence that there isn't life, and we don't have evidence that there is, and therefore we're still collecting data. Now, of course, that's no good for somebody looking for a headline like a journalist. So one particular journalist pressed him on the point and said, but what does your gut tell you? Because she was seeking a headline. And this was Carl Sagan's answer. But I try not to think with my gut. If I'm serious about understanding the world, thinking with anything besides my brain, as tempting as that might be, is likely to get me into trouble. So in a very good-humored and patient way, he's explained that, if you want to be right, if you care about doing things right, you need to use your head, you need to use your brain, not your instinct, not your gut, not your feelings. We are not our feelings. So it's a little bit back to that. And so I'm saying to you, if you're serious about doing your best for your child, you need to use something other than your gut or your feelings, to use your head. Now, this requires learning, and learning requires mental work. Learning consists of thinking new thoughts. That's what learning is. If you're not thinking new thoughts, you haven't learned anything. It creates new pathways in the brain. And some new thoughts can be in conflict with some old thoughts. So you might have come here with some preconceptions, some beliefs that you've grown up with or acquired, and I might contradict them. So you want to resolve such conflicts using your head rather than emotions. Okay, this is a nice overview for you. I call it the Pyramid of Flourishing. And I think we're all here trying ourselves to flourish, but also to help our children to flourish and be their best selves. And this is not only the structure of my presentation, but I think it's a lovely overview of my entire message and presentation. And that is that the base layer of this pyramid is mind management. I'll explain what that is very shortly. That'll be the first part. The second part of the presentation is about mindset, which too will be explained. And the third part is perspective. And then the last part, in the case of 11+, if that's what you're looking at, but the things I'm telling you apply to you as parents, and what you learn, you can apply to all situations in life, not just preparing your child for 11+, though of course that's what my history has been for just over 20 years. And that's probably what has brought you here today. But I'm also showing you that the relative importance of these aspects. Look at how huge mind management is in relation to 11+ stuff. That's also an indicator of how important mind management is in relation to things that you do specifically to prepare your child for 11+. And so on up the pyramid, you can see that it's in declining order of importance. Or if you look at the other way, coming down the pyramid, it's in increasing order of importance for your child's flourishing or anybody's flourishing. So mind management will come first, and here we go. Effective mind management, that is yours and your child's, is critically important to your child's flourishing, meaning your mind management is critical to your child's flourishing, not only your child's mind management. So what is this mind management thing? Well, let's try and understand it like this with a series of questions. What are some of the things that you do that you know you should not do? Or things that you avoid doing that you know you should do? Now, I mean, they can be trivial things or they can be huge things. Let's just, for example, just so you understand the kinds of things I'm talking about, or just to give you some ideas. For example, things you do that you know you should not do. You might eat a lot of unhealthy foods. You might avoid doing exercise, going to the gym when you know you really should go regularly. These are examples of the kinds of things I'm talking about, but they could be other things. You're not going to share them, so bring something to mind. Because I've got a follow-on question. The follow-on question is, okay, even at the time when you're about to eat that 5th biscuit, knowing you should not be eating biscuits at all, something inside you is saying, no, don't do this. This is bad. You're going to regret it. And yet you find yourself doing it. So that does raise this slightly more challenging question, is why is it that you sometimes don't do what you know is the sensible thing to do? And you do know. You know when you're doing something you should not do, or avoiding something that you really should be doing, and yet you find yourself not doing the thing that you know is the right thing or the sensible thing to do. That's a slightly harder question to answer. Why do we do that? When we know what's good, what's right, what we should be doing. Well, at this point, you might be beating yourself up and thinking, oh, I'm just a bad person. I'm just a weak person. But actually, I've got news for you, good news. And I do like to share good news. In fact, the whole presentation is good news. You'll see at the end. So the question 3 is, who is your biggest enemy? And it is not you. Don't beat yourself up. You are not a terrible person. It is, in fact, your chimp. Now, I'll explain what that is. But if you're unaware of your chimp, you are in trouble. Okay. So somebody's put a comment in the chat, something to do with culture. And actually, I'm really glad you've done that, sir or madam. I didn't see who it was, because that's going to be addressed very shortly. Now, this chimp isn't an actual mammal that's running around separately. It's something that is in your head, but is not you. Now, this next video clip is a short introduction to the chimp.
There are three core tenets to the book. You have a chimp and a human in your head, and they want very distinct things. Your human is a simplified representation of your prefrontal cortex and some other parts of your brain that handle long-term thinking, delayed gratification, emotion control, consideration, and ethics. You also have a chimp in your brain. This is the limbic system and all the older parts of your brain, the parts of your brain that we would have had more in common with a chimp. Steve Peters separates out these parts of the brain and says that they want completely distinct things. They have entirely different motivations. And if you don't understand this and fail to put them in their appropriate places, then you will be forever in conflict within your own mind. This book is extremely simple. It has no flowery words or high concept ideas. It's plain and simple, to the point. You've got two dudes in your head, a chimp and a human. They are in conflict. You need to sort out that conflict if you want to have a happy, healthy, long life. And there is great, great power in this simplicity. Anytime you find yourself being overly emotional, reactive, sad, scared, you have to realize that your chimp is acting up. Anytime you feel hurt or jealous, it is the chimp that is in control. Realize that you are not your chimp. The chimp is like a child that you must always look after and that will never grow up. It will always remain the chimp, and you must accept it as it is. Don't control and hate the chimp. Manage and love the chimp. This requires you to listen and give it what it needs. So if the chimp is frightened, you don't just go, shut up, or ignore it, or berate it, or anything like that. You don't ignore your emotions. You don't ignore what your body is telling you. Instead, you listen, and then you find the most logical, rational solution to the problem. You must be a problem solver. And if you don't find solutions that appease the chimp and make the human happy, you will be forever miserable. If you don't make the chimp happy, if you ignore it or try to trick it, then it will take over. Your chimp needs sex, it needs a tribe, it needs love and security, and it needs territory. And you have to give it these things, amongst other things, to avoid internal conflict. You must satisfy its needs, keeping check on it like you would with a small, scared child. If you do this, then it will behave. By separating out the parts of your brain and giving them identities, it allows you to distance yourself from the more base, reactive parts of your mind, and thereby love yourself more. Where once you might say, why the hell do I always get so angry over such small, silly things? I'm such a goddamn loser. You now say, why does this get your back up? And how can we make sure this happens less in the future? What do you need, Jim? I mean, you might or might not say it in a weird, fake American accent. This acceptance of all aspects of yourself is pure liberation. The vast majority of people are completely ruled by their chimps, and they don't even realize it. This makes them act in an angry, petty, possessive, egotistical way. If you keep an awareness of this, then when people act out, it allows you to have more compassion, empathy, and patience with them. You can say, hang on a second, this person is clearly ruled by their chimp. Sure, they may be doing me wrong, but far better to have some slight I can bounce back from in 3 seconds than to have an unruly chimp who is on the clock 24/7, causing mayhem and terror and destroying one's life.
So if you're unfamiliar with your chimp, it's probably making important decisions that you really ought to be making, and not just for you, but for your family too. In that clip, there was mention of Steve Peters, the author of this book, The Chimp Paradox. I'm just holding it up to the camera. This is called The Chimp Paradox, and it's about mind management. And this is where the model, and it is a model of the chimp versus the human, was expounded or published. So it's the idea of this Steve Peters. And that book, I think, is potentially so useful if you're open to it, that I issue it to the parents of every pupil on the 11+ course. Now, so now we come to this. How do you know when it is you in charge as opposed to your chimp? We like to aspire to being the thoughtful, intelligent, caring human person. That's our aspiration on the left. But the reality all too often is on the right, where there's actually a chimp making the decision. And it's really important that you know when it is you that's making the decision and when it is your chimp that's having the influence. And so the key question is, how can you recognize when it is the chimp that is in charge? And more good news for you is that it's really, really easy. And here is a summary of it. Good ways. So on the left, green, good. This is you as opposed to your chimp. Good ways to make decisions. You ask, why is this important? In other words, what's the value behind it? What are the facts? Which facts matter the most? Because you know how it is these days. You can go onto the internet and search on almost any topic and get millions of hits. In other words, almost infinite information on any topic. And you have to pick out which facts are the important ones. And of course, that does go back to why this is important in the first place. So which facts matter the most? And then which decision makes the best logical sense? These are human ways of making choices and decisions. Now on the right, red, bad, chimp, bad ways. So this is how you recognize it is your chimp that is in charge. What are others doing? Well, that's culture. What are other people doing? What did other people do? What have we always done? How will it make me look? If I do this, will other people frown at me? Will they look down at me? Will they laugh at me? Will it make me look bad? See? It's looking for acceptance. What will people think? Same thing. What do my urges say? Urges, feelings, emotions. They are not you, they're the chimp. Do you see? So it's really, really simple. If those are the thoughts that are influencing your choice, your decision when it comes to important things, then it isn't you that's making those choices. It is your chimp. And there you are in a nutshell. I mean, you're very welcome to take a screenshot if you wish to help you remember that. But a recording will be available on YouTube in a few days anyway. This is really important. Remember, mindset is the foundation layer of the pyramid. And if this foundation is lacking, the rest of it doesn't really have a foundation to sit upon. Now, think of one or two goals that you have. They can be, again, trivial goals, or they can be really important goals. But, actually, it'd be really good if I can see a show of hands. I'll just lower all hands. Okay, now, if you think of a goal that you have, let's imagine one of my goals is to learn a particular tune, a particular song on the piano over the next few weeks. All right, that's one of my goals. Let's say you might have your own goals. Some people are trying to learn some particular thing, or they're aiming to lose weight or change their lifestyle. I don't know what it might be, but raise your hand if you've thought of a goal, big or small. Of course, you're not going to share it. It's completely private, but it's good if you think of something, a goal that you have. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower all hands, and we're going to proceed to the next step. So let's talk about goals and success. So let's just look at this. Getting your child into a grammar school seems like a sensible and noble goal, doesn't it? Your child getting into a particular grammar school is surely success, isn't it? Well, wrong. Wrong on both counts. Those are not sensible goals. Now, at this, your chimp feels indignant, says, how dare you? Who do you think you are? But, so that's the chimp speaking. But your human, that is you, is intrigued and wonders why. Where is he going with this? What's he getting at? And that brings us to Rosie, which is an anecdote. Rosie was a pupil of mine about 20 years ago. Yeah, about 20 years ago. And she used to come to class with a friend. This was in Langley Pavilion on a Sunday, I remember. And they used to come and go together, and the families were friends too. Now, they sat the 11 plus. At that time, it used to take place in mid-November. This was for the Slough exam. And I lived in Slough at the time. Now, sometime after the exam, some weeks after the exam, I was doing my weekly shop at the Co-op, which used to be there on the Bath Road in Slough. And as I was doing my shop, pushing my trolley around, I saw Rosie and her family ahead of me, and they looked very upbeat and in a sort of celebratory mood. And they came up to me, and the father came and shook my hand. And he was very glad to share with me the news that Rosie had done well in her 11th class and she'd be going to one of the grammar schools in Slough. And I was really pleased, and I felt a little bit good about my work because I felt like I might have contributed something to her getting into the grammar school. And then I was feeling a bit chuffed and continued with my shop. And at the end of an aisle, I saw Rosie's friend and her family, and they looked as if there had been a death in the family. They were walking slowly with their heads lowered. And I was a bit concerned. So I went up to them and I asked, you know, is everything okay? And the father couldn't even make eye contact with me. And he said she didn't make it. And I thought somebody had died, really, because of the way they were reacting. And when I realized that he was talking about his daughter didn't pass the 11 plus, I thought to myself, what a ridiculous reaction to a score in a test, as if somebody has died. Do you even realize the damage that you are doing to your daughter with this childish reaction? And I thought, I can't be standing by and doing nothing when parents are so ignorant that they react like that, and they're actually not helping their child's flourishing at all, but undermining their children's flourishing. So it was at that point I stopped feeling quite so good about my work, and I thought, you know, actually educating the parents is much more important than educating the children, and you'll understand shortly why that is. So what is success? What is success then? Well, it does depend who you ask. And I think that since COVID, many of us have become much more in touch with this. That is your health. That's your real wealth. Is it happiness? I do like this slide a lot because I think there's a lot of truth in just those handful of words. Two things prevent us from happiness. One, living in the past, and two, observing others. Oh, I have another clip for you.
The book is also great because it talks about how to set effective goals. Because a lot of the times, if you set a goal and don't reach it, you'll feel disappointed with yourself. There's a way you can avoid this disappointment, and that's by setting a goal that isn't controlled by external factors. For example, you could set a goal of getting a job, but there's no guarantee you're going to get it. However, what if you change your goals to reading up on the job, learning interview techniques, and how to act the part? If you don't get the job, you can still be happy because you've achieved your goals and maximize your chance of getting.
So what are sensible goals? Well, the gist of that short clip is that outcomes are not sensible goals. In other words, what I mean by outcomes is traditional outcomes, meaning results, getting the job, passing, getting the award, coming first in a race, that sort of thing. Those are traditional outcomes. And setting those as goals is not sensible. And the reason is because those things are not within your control. Now, if you think they are within your control, then I'm about to shatter that illusion. Supposing you're going for a job and you set the goal of getting the job. Now, I'm telling you that is not a sensible goal, and that's what this video clip said. Now I'm going to explain why it's not. Sure, it's in your control to read up about the job. Yes, it's in your control to go for the job for which you are very well qualified and experienced. It's in your control to produce a really good CV and covering letter, and to get great referees. It's in your power to dress right for the job, to practice interview techniques so that you come across the best that you can. And all of those things are in your control, and all of those are sensible goals as per the column on the left. But getting the job, that's not in your control, because you can do all those things right and not get the job. Now, there are a million reasons why, but I'm going to point out one, which is this, that you're not the one making the decision. Another human being is making that decision. And that human being is prone to making a poor choice, just as all of us are. And that human being may, on paper, recognize that you're a really good candidate, maybe even the best candidate on paper, but they just get this hunch that no, you're not quite right for it. And they'll go with that. And they may be the influential person on the selection panel, the interview panel, and then you won't get the job. And that person themselves who influence the decision may themselves not even realize why it is that they have, if you like, been prejudiced against you. It may be something at a subconscious level. It might be that you reminded them of somebody from their past and just gave them a bad feeling, and they were not even conscious of that. And I'm sure you yourselves here will have experienced something like that, where you meet somebody you've never met before, and just something about them reminds you about somebody you knew in the past, and you just get either a good feeling or a bad feeling about them. And sometimes you treat a person in a way that's maybe not your best self without really realizing why. So you're not in control of the outcomes. You're in control of your processes, your preparations. Now let's translate that across to 11+. The reason it's not a sensible goal to pass is because pass is an outcome that's not in your control. You might think it is. You might think it's in my control, given my experience as a teacher and 11+ tutor, but it isn't even in my control. And I'll explain why. It isn't a sensible goal. Passing the 11+, getting to a particular, those are not sensible goals. And they're not because they're outcomes based. Why can't you be in control? Why can't I be in control of them? Well, let me just give you 2 reasons. Well, it's kind of one reason, but I'm going to give 2 explanations for it. And the reason is this: because the outcome of 11+ depends on performance on the day of the test and nothing else. Now, a child can be thoroughly prepared, highly intellectual, very, very knowledgeable and skilled in all the skills required for 11+. And then on the day of the test, they underperformed and didn't pass. So you see that 11+ test is not measuring a child's potential or their intelligence or their teachability. It isn't measuring any such thing. It tries to, but it doesn't. It measures performance on the day of the test and nothing else. Well, you can say, well, then you can be in control of that, surely. Well, no, you cannot be in control of that for a million reasons that you won't even be aware of. Let's take 1 or 2. The first sign I have that I might be getting something is when I can't remember my times tables. Now, of course, times tables are part of my daily work because I'm teaching the children maths. And when I can't remember my times tables, I know something's wrong. Now, that can happen for a couple of reasons. One is that I might be getting slightly ill and there's no other symptom, and it might come to nothing. And who's to say that's not going to happen to your child on the day of the exam? They were just on the verge of getting something and it didn't quite come to any full-blown symptoms. Or other times when I have difficulty remembering things is when I can't quite focus. And that sometimes is because I didn't sleep properly the previous night. And who's to say that your child didn't lose out on quality sleep the night before the exam? You might think that's in your control, but it isn't. Here's something else. I had a boy, Nikhil, and he was a very capable boy, top of his school, and he took the 11+ course in his stride, and he was expected by everybody to sail through the 11+ exam. And he didn't. He failed it by 1 mark. He got 110 for Slough when the pass mark was, and still is, 111. And everybody was mystified, except his mum, who subsequently told me that it was her fault. And I thought, how can it be your fault? And she said that in order to try and motivate her son, that on the way to the exam, which I think he sat at Herschel Grammar School, she had said to him, son, don't worry about anything, just give it your best. And afterwards, we'll take you to Thorpe Park as a treat and to celebrate. Well, that was it. Now, the intention was great, but the effect was not, because he's a 10-year-old boy and he's very excited about going to Thorpe Park, which was a very big deal. And throughout the exam, that's where his mind was. He was excited about Thorpe Park, and he wasn't focused on what is in front of him because he was focused on the next thing. As a result, he missed by 1 mark. And it's quite remarkable under the circumstances that he only missed by 1 mark. He clearly was very capable. Now, the good news again, told you there's lots of good news today. He did get to a grammar school because she appealed, and the appeal was successful. And probably he went on to study medicine, which is what he aspired to. Now, look, there are a million things that could happen that affect your child. It could be something they heard on the radio the previous night, or just a thought that they had, something that they read, something you said to them. You just cannot control the performance on the day of the test. You can, the thing to focus on, the thing that is in your control is the processes. Being diligent with your work, doing it in the right spirit, doing plenty of reading, which we'll come to before very long, and so on. So the processes, the preparation, just like with the job interview, the preparation, the processes, you do all the right things in the right way. Those are in your control. Well, then how do we measure success? Well, this is Professor Steve Peters, the author of the Chimp Paradox, and this is what he says. He says, measure success in life by effort and doing your best. Then it is in your hands to succeed and be proud of yourself. So if a child prepares thoroughly, they work hard, they follow all the guidance, and they're diligent in their work, they are successes. They have succeeded already. And their success does not depend on what score they get in the test, which is the mistake that that gentleman in co-op was making. He was measuring his success, his family's success, his family status. It's all chimp driven in essence by the score in the test, and not congratulating his daughter for succeeding in preparing herself well. Do you see? If you don't understand this and you don't embrace it, you're putting your child at great risk. Whether they pass or they don't pass, you're still putting your child at great risk. Think about it like this. You might think, oh, but surely if they pass and we call that success, then that's good, isn't it? No, it isn't good. Let me explain briefly why. Because if you measure success by external outcomes, such as passing the test, then what's happening is, if your child fails, they will feel like they are a failure. And they will have that stigma with them for a very long time, and it'll affect their flourishing hugely. But just as bad is if you measure their success by external outcomes like passing, then your child is not worth anything. Their efforts are not worth anything. Learning isn't worth doing. It's just the passing that matters. And they are measuring their own success and their own flourishing by external outcomes. And I think that is just as bad. Okay, so that is mind management. Now we come to mindset, the second layer of the pyramid. Your mindset can help or hinder you in striving towards your potential, and your child in striving towards their potential. In other words, just as your mind management affects your child, so your mindset affects your child too. So what is this mindset thing? Well, this is a really good video about it.
Do you have a growth mindset? How do you think of intelligence? Do you think you're born with a certain level of intelligence that you can't change much? Or do you think it's something you can work on to develop and grow? Many students think that their level of intelligence is fixed, that they can't do much to change it. This can lead them to feeling that they just aren't smart enough to succeed, especially when courses get more challenging. But what if you knew that no matter who you are, through effort and effective strategies, you can develop your level of intelligence? According to Stanford University psychologist Carol Dweck, how we think about our brains actually affects how well we learn. Dweck says that people generally think with one of two different mindsets, a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. People with a fixed mindset believe that their intelligence is fixed at birth and they can't do much to change it. People with a growth mindset believe that their talents, abilities, and intelligence can be developed in different ways. And you may feel like you have a fixed mindset in some ways and a growth mindset in others. For example, you may think with a fixed mindset that you're just not a math person, but you may adopt a growth mindset with writing, music, sports, or another discipline. In fact, scientists who study the brain have found that the brain is like a muscle. It changes and grows in response to what we do. The harder we work using helpful strategies and the more challenges we face, the stronger and smarter the brain becomes. This is because the brain is made up of cells called neurons, which are connected to each other. As we learn, the number of connections between our neurons also grows. As we continue to exercise our brains, the connections between our neurons grow as well. These new and stronger connections help to make us smarter. Scientists call this concept neuroplasticity. Research shows that students who adopt a growth mindset, who believe that their brains can grow and develop through effort and challenges, actually do better in school. For these students, the goal is not to prove what they already know, but rather to learn and grow. Students with a growth mindset view challenges and mistakes not as proof that they aren't smart enough, but as opportunities to become smarter. The good news is that you can develop a growth mindset. You've taken the first step by learning about some of the science that shows you can grow your brain. The next step is to consider your mindset. If you have some areas in which you think you aren't smart, challenge yourself to learn and grow. Why should you bother? Because if you learn to develop your mindset, you'll persist longer with problems. You'll take on harder challenges and stretch your mental muscle more. You won't be as affected by setbacks, and in the end, you'll learn more. And the effects of changing your mindset can stick with you for years, since you're training your brain to think in a new way.
The next video, when I first watched it, it blew my mind. Short and sweet.
So check this out. Carol Dweck and her colleagues wanted to look into the impacts that praise had on children's development. So what they did is they took over 400 fifth grade students from all across the nation, and they did a really simple yet interesting study. Here's how it went down. They gave all the kids a really easy nonverbal IQ test. There were 10 questions, and at the end of the test, they praised all the children in one of two ways. The first group was praised for their intelligence. So they said, wow, great job. You must be really smart at this. Now the second group was praised for their effort. So they said, wow, great job. You must have worked really hard at this. Now this is a really subtle difference, but the impact it had is incredible. So after praising the kids and getting them divided up into the two groups, they gave them all an option for their next test. The first option was, hey, this next test is going to be a little bit harder, but it's going to be a great opportunity to learn and grow. Now, the second option was, this next test will be similar to the first, and you will surely do well on it. Now, the interesting thing is, out of the group that was praised for their intelligence, 67% of them chose the easier option, while 92% of the kids who were praised for their effort chose the harder test. This is unbelievable to think about, how just the subtle difference in the way that they were praised had such an impact. Carol Dweck explains why this
The
happens.
child or adult hears, oh, you think I'm brilliant and talented. That's why you admire me. That's why you value me. I better not do anything that will disprove this evaluation. As a result, they enter a fixed mindset, they play it safe in the future, and they limit the growth of their talents. Whereas focusing on the strategies they use, the way they're stretching themselves and taking on hard tasks, the intense practice they're doing, those are the kinds of things that say to a child or an older athlete, it's about the process of growth. As a result, they don't feel, oh, if I make a mistake, you won't think I'm talented. They think, oh, if I don't take on hard things and stick to them, I'm not going to grow.
Next, Dweck and her colleagues gave all the kids a really, really difficult test. It was one that they would surely fail, but they wanted to look at how the different kids attacked this challenge. Dweck noticed that the group that was praised for effort worked harder, longer, and actually enjoyed this test more than the group that was praised for their intelligence. This group got really frustrated with this test and had the tendency to give up early. After this artificially induced failure round, all of the kids were given a third and final test. Now, this test was the same level of difficulty as the first one, but check out the results. The group that was praised for their intelligence actually did worse on this test than the first one. Their average score actually dropped by 20%, while the group that was praised for their effort did significantly better, raising their average score by nearly 30%. This is a 50% difference in performance that was caused by a few subtle differences in the way that they were praised. This study shows how praise can either make or break a child's development. I mean, we all do it. We all want to be positive with the children we work with. So teachers, coaches, parents are always looking for ways to support their kids and tend to praise them quite a bit. So we need to look at research like this and realize, okay, praise is a good thing and there's nothing wrong with being positive, but we need to be very careful about praising someone's intelligence or abilities and focus more on the process and the effort that they put.
So you see, what a powerful thing. And what a shame if there's a parent who does not realize this. This is why I'm saying it's the kind of thing that every parent needs to know, because we are trying to do the right things, the best things for our children. And sometimes we end up undermining them without meaning to, without trying to, like Nikhil's mom did. And this is why I do education for parents. And here is a book, Mindset, which was referred to in that last clip. This is the book written by Carol Dweck, who we heard speaking in that video. This book too is so important that I issue it to the parents of every child on the 11+ course. So there are two books which I issue for parents, that is the Chimp Paradox and Mindset, because I think they're so important for any parent to be aware of. Now, obviously, a lot of parents don't actually read those books, but it's there. And I feel it's my duty to provide that opportunity. Just as, you know, we provide a course for the children and education, guidance, resources, teaching, and some children just don't use them to the full. But at least they have that opportunity there. Okay, so that is mindset, and that is the second layer of the pyramid of flourishing. Now we come to perspective, and that is a realistic perspective on your part. A realistic perspective on your part allows you to apply your energies where they really count for your child. Now, here we begin again with a question: who's your greatest teacher? Now, somebody might have come to mind. I hope somebody came to your mind. Somebody always comes to my mind when I think of who's my greatest teacher. I tend to remember a couple of my teachers from secondary school whenever I see this question. And but I hope you've thought of somebody. Okay, now I've got a second question to follow on from that, which is what knowledge, what beliefs, what abilities were you born with? Now, obviously you can't remember that, but you've seen your children born and you've seen other people's children born, and a little common sense tells you that we are not born with any knowledge. We are not born with any beliefs, and we have very few abilities, important ones, you know, apart from the biological functions. We're born with the critical ability to learn. So we are learning machines. No knowledge, no beliefs, but the ability to learn. This is what we're born with. Now, that ability to learn is right there from probably before birth. And we learn. But who and do we learn from? Well, look at the weekly hours for a child, let's say a primary school child. Well, we all have 168 hours in a week, 24 times 7. But a child who is in primary school normally might spend about 30 hours in school in a week, perhaps 3 hours in tuition, perhaps 56, maybe even over 60 hours sleeping, maybe a few hours on extracurricular things, you know, might be doing swimming, some kind of sport, some sort of community activities, leaving about 70 hours, maybe 60 hours, but a lot of hours doing what? Well, if they're not doing any of those things, they're at home with you, under your care, under your influence, under your education. So who's your greatest teacher? Well, as adults, each of us is our own greatest teacher. But you know, even your 10-year-old child, and children are mostly 10 years old when they sit the 11+ test, they too are their own greatest teacher by the time they're 10. But after that, it is our parents. They are our greatest teachers after ourselves, because they shape our mind management, they shape our mindset, and they shape our models of ourselves and the world, i.e. our own perspective. So you see, you have a great responsibility, because you're either equipping yourself very well with a constructive, useful mind management and mindset, or you're lumbering them, handicapping them. So this comes back to the question of, are you an asset or an obstacle to your child's education? If you don't know about mind management and mindset, there's a pretty good chance that you're an obstacle. But after that, it's our children who are our greatest teachers, because they remind us what it is to be curious. And as adults, we get so busy trying to make ends meet and fulfill various responsibility that we kind of forget what it's like to be curious. We're just busy. Children question the things that we'd prefer not to have to justify. So they make us think about why. They keep asking, but why daddy, but why mummy? And then they won't always settle for, because I say so, because I'm your mom, which is not really a good answer. They remind us how ignorant we once were and how far we've come. Now, that's a really important point, so I'm going to elaborate on it a little. Sometimes when we're working with our children, and I'm speaking as a parent now, we can experience frustration because we think, but it's so easy, why don't you get it? It's so easy, I'm making it so simple for you, why aren't you getting it? And we feel frustration. But what we have to remember is we were born knowing nothing. And now we think it's so easy, so obvious. So look how far you've come. And that gives you faith that if you've come that far, having been born knowing nothing, look at what you know now, so will your child. They just need time to grow at their pace. And they're not cynical about the world yet, and need never be. Cynicism is learned. Flourishing then. I split down, if you say the power over a child's flourishing is 100%, then how is that 100% split up? Well, I say, in my experience, for a child who is 10 years old, it's split 50, 40, 10, 50%, 40%, 10%. So you might think, oh, where does this power or this influence lie, this control? Well, 50% is with the self. So the child who's 10 typically is 50% in charge of their own flourishing. And you, mom and dad, have the 40% in your hands. And the rest of the world, including formal education, is at best 10%. Now, this means there's a whopping 90%, which is in the home, that is between you and your child. their flourishing is in your hands. And what I find is that parents really, really bust a gut on schools and exams and getting into this school and that university and this course and this tutor and all that. And they actually neglect the 90% that's in their own hands. They know nothing about mindset. They know nothing about mind management. They know nothing about praising in a way that doesn't undermine your child. All of that is critical part of that 90%. And what they're doing is they're putting so much effort and so much money, so much emotional energy into the much, much smaller part. So they're lacking this healthy perspective. And therefore their efforts are being placed, well-meaning people like yourselves and me, well-meaning people who are misguided. So now 50% at age 10-ish, okay? By the time we're adults, 18 years old, it's almost 100% within our own hands. But when a baby's born, they're 0% responsible for their own learning. You as parents or the household are 100% responsible for that child's education. And they learn, you know, before they have their first day in nursery, they've learned a massive amount from you or the household. They've learned mind management, they've learned mindset, they've learned about their place in the world. And the experience that they have of education is largely shaped by those things. So you can see that by the time they get to 10, you know, if you haven't equipped your child very well, then there are things you can still do, which you are doing today, which is to educate yourself and equip your child to learn better and to manage themselves better. So 50, 40, 10, that's the healthy perspective. In short, neither the academic flourishing of your child nor their flourishing as a person relies on which school or university they go to. So I'm not saying that it doesn't matter at all which school they go to or which university they go to. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that that's not what their flourishing depends on. Now, pay and absolve, what does this even mean? Let me explain what it means to absolve yourself. When I have a problem with my car, I'm not a motor mechanic and I'm not particularly interested in it either. And so I would just take it to the garage and I say, I'm having this problem. Can you have a look? And they'll say, yes, leave it with us, Mr. Taylor, and we'll give you a call when we've had a look. So they call me and they say, oh, it's this, that, and the other. And if you want us to go ahead, it'll cost this much. And then I say, yes, please go ahead and fix it. And then when it's ready, I get another call and I go and pick it up. And they usually show me, oh, it was this part, this is the broken part that we took out and replaced. And I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. How would I know? I'm not a mechanic. I just take their word for it. In other words, I pay and I absolve myself of all involvement and responsibility for the repair. I say, mechanic, it's all down to you. I do the same thing if I have a problem with my computer, because again, I'm not technically minded in that way. But here's the thing, you can't do that with your child's education. You can't leave your primary school child with a tutor, or a school for that matter, and leave them to it. Because at this age, the overlap between parenting and teaching is too great. It is not like leaving your car at a garage or your computer at a repair shop. Okay, now you're here because you want to do your best for your child and you want the best for your child. So you want the best for your child. Well, here are a couple of things to think about. Then don't compare. Don't compare your child to their brother, their sister, you, their mum, their dad, their uncle, their aunt, their granddad, their cousin, their schoolmate, somebody in the media. Don't compare them. Comparison is unkind. It is often manipulative and it stifles the human. Often you see it brings out the worst in people, though it's an attempt to try and bring out something better, usually, not always. The only person you should try to be better than is the person you were yesterday. So For your child, if you want to give them encouragement and motivate them to do better, don't compare them to somebody else. And here's the thing that comes most naturally to us as parents is to compare them to a sibling, a brother or a sister. And that is the absolute worst comparison you can make. That is the one that will do the most damage. So don't do it. Compare your child to themselves. If you want to encourage your child to learn, then show them, hey, look, last year, this time, you didn't know your 7 times table, and look at you now. Look how far you've come. And do you remember a couple of years ago, you didn't even know your 5 times table. And now it's like that to you. See, so compare them to themselves, show them the progress that they have made, remind them of how far they've come, comparing them to themselves, not to another person. After all, isn't your child a worthy human being in their own right, without comparison to somebody else? Or are they only a worthy person in relation to somebody else? That's Chimp, comparing. Okay, back to the point then. So you want the best for your child. Well, what is the best for your child depends on who your child is. Depends on them, their own nature, their likes and dislikes, their talents. You have to know your child and respect their aptitudes and their natural inclinations and value them for who they are. In other words, I come from a culture, which many of you probably do, where it's like a child that shows any kind of academic promise when they're young, everybody in the household, the family, community is talking about, oh, they're going to grow up to be a doctor, they're going to be a doctor. And that's a tradition, and it's quite widespread in the world. But nobody's asking if that's actually what the child is cut out for. They might not be. So, you know, before we start deciding the fate of our children, let's see who they are. Here's the point. And this is the most gaudy, most eye-catching slide in the whole thing, because it's probably the most important thing I'm going to tell you today. Your child's desire to please you can mislead you into believing that they want what you want for them, causing you to make choices that undermine their flourishing as human beings. Now that's a long sentence and I've broken it down, but I'll just elaborate a little on it. Your child's desire to please you. And sometimes it doesn't feel like your child has a desire to please you, but they do. So what will happen is if you're saying that, oh, they're going to be a doctor, and they're hearing that around them, even if it's not being so told to them, they're thinking, oh, well, maybe I'm going to grow up to be a doctor. How do they know? They're saying it to please you. And then you're hearing them say it. And then you think, oh, it's what they want as well. And then you encourage them to go down that route. I mean, I'm just taking doctor as an example because it's a common phenomenon worldwide. But what happens is that they're saying it to please you. And then you think that you're doing what they want. And then in the end, they end up doing something that they're just not cut out for, something they didn't particularly want to do. And they didn't even realize that it's not what they wanted to do until they're doing it. And they're wondering why they're not happy doing it. And you're wondering, well, what can possibly be wrong? So be wary of wishing your child or trying to turn them into someone they're not. You can't do that without stifling your child's true self. And if you stifle your child's true self, they're missing out on who they are. Okay. Now, sometimes parents are so adamant about getting their child into a grammar school, whether it's good for them or not, literally. As if there's something good about going to grammar school in itself. Well, it isn't. Grammar schools provide a highly academic education which suits the learning needs of children who are highly academic. The expectations and workload in a grammar school are appropriate for children who have high academic potential. How high? Well, about a quarter, the top quarter of the most academic children, roughly. For other children, grammar schools are likely to be overwhelming and damaging, and some parents aren't thinking about that. They know their child is not particularly academic, and yet they are trying to get them into a grammar school, where what would happen if somehow a child who is not particularly academic or not particularly interested in learning gets to a grammar school is that they're going to be the bottom of every class every day of their remainder of their childhood. And that will absolutely destroy their self-esteem. Any parent who thinks that, yes, let me put my child into an environment where they're going to be bottom of the class every day in every subject for the rest of their childhood, if they think that's a good choice for their child, I think they should think again. Because that's got nothing to do with your child's flourishing. Okay. So let's imagine that your child is actually particularly academic and does love learning. Well, then grammar school is probably a good place for them to be. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes children who are well suited to grammar school don't get to a grammar school. That happens all the time to thousands of children every year. But those children, the fact that they're suited to grammar school, it's because they have a great aptitude for learning and they have the attitude for learning, i.e. they love learning. And those children excel wherever they go. Those children, because in fact, I've said this to parents before, that it's not what the school brings to the child that makes the child flourish. It's what the child brings to the school that makes the child flourish. And those children are bringing what they need to bring, and therefore they flourish. So, you know, you don't need to actually be that worried about your child's education. I mean, this is the message I'm giving you. Anyway, when it comes to 11 plus preparation, let's suppose that you think, yes, my child is very academic, they love learning, and grammar school will be good for them. So then, of course, you want to give them the best opportunity on the day of the test. So you prepare them well and you send them to somebody like me. And, you know, but I ask parents sometimes, I used to do this presentation in person, by the way. So I used to actually ask parents and get their input. And when I asked, what do you think is most important about 11 plus? These were some of the answers I used to get. Oh, the format of the test. Is it CEM? Is it GL? The pattern of the test? Or it's the exam techniques and it's the speed. Or it's the vocabulary, it's the word list, reading list, flashcards, vocabulary, synonyms and antonyms. Or it's practice, practice, practice. Do lots of practice papers, lots of mock papers. Mocks. And the answer is they're all mistaken, because none of those is anywhere near the most important thing. So they're misguided. So they want something good for their child, but again, just like praising outcomes, they're mistaken in the thing that they do. So here now, the next part of this, and it's the last part, is the 11 plus stuff specifically. Everything in 11 plus is simple. Now I'm speaking from my 20 years experience of teaching 11 plus. I know this is not the kind of thing you expect to hear from a tutor, but I'm telling you, genuinely, everything in 11 plus is simple, except English. 11 plus maths is baby stuff. It's really simple. It's key stage 2 maths. Non-verbal reasoning is simple. I don't say every question is easy, but it's all simple in principle. There's nothing complex. Verbal reasoning is simple. So why do children trip up? What's the challenge of 11 plus? Well, there are many challenges, but in terms of subjects, it's English. Sometimes children are really brilliant with their arithmetic. Problem is, they have no skill at understanding the information they're given and what the question is asking. So they don't know which operations to perform in order to solve the problem. English. At least half the marks in maths are for English. Verbal reasoning is easy. What trips children up is that they don't have a good enough mastery of English. And this is something that many parents neglect, and children in preparing towards 11 plus, the development of their English. This nonsense about, oh, is it CM, is it GL, it's this pattern, it's that pattern, it's CSSE, it's this, it's that. It doesn't matter. Why do you think it is that grammar schools disclose the name of the organization that sets the test papers? Because that's all it is. CEM is just an organization and GL is another organization. They set the 11 plus test papers. Why do they disclose that information if it's not important? Well, the answer is in the question. They disclose that information because it's not important, because it doesn't tell you anything useful. That information is trivial, so they can disclose it safely. They are testing the same skills and the same knowledge, primarily literacy, but also Key Stage 2 maths, and then spatial ability. And it's not just CEM and GL, but so does everybody else. They all test the same things, same knowledge, same skills. And what is this that's being tested? Well, literacy, primarily, as I said, reasoning with language, knowledge of and skills with British English. I now emphasize British English because there are many varieties of English, American English being the most prevalent, but of course there's also Indian English, Australian English, New Zealand English, South African English, and probably many others. And they differ from one another. And because American English is so prevalent on the internet in social, entertainment, songs, films, then many children grow up not actually realizing that what they're learning isn't English, they're learning American. And then they are not well enough educated because they can't tell the difference. And this knowledge, mastery of British English is about 75% of the test. And now you might be saying, wait a minute, but there are 3 papers, surely it's only 1/3. No, because yes, they need numeracy skills, but at least half the marks, probably more in a typical maths paper, are for comprehension, understanding of the information and the question, and that is English, pure and simple. And then there's the spatial ability, the pictorial skills, the nonverbal reasoning, which is a small part. The ability to understand and follow instructions, all the instructions given verbally on the day of the test, all the instructions given in writing on the day of the test are in British English. Then of course, speed matters because it's a timed test. So if you don't answer enough questions, you can't get enough marks. But there's no point being fast unless you have a really great mastery of English, because you might be fast, but you just don't know the things you need to know. And ultimately, it is measuring the ability to perform well in tests. And some children have a knack for that and some don't. Some fall apart on the day of the test, unfortunately. And so what is needed in order to prepare for a test like that? Well, that's what I do. It's my profession. Children need access to an excellent syllabus, which is created by me. They need to be taught well. I do the teaching of the syllabus for all the children myself, and I record myself doing that teaching. So not only children, but parents also have access to 100% of my teaching of the syllabus. They need to ask and be asked a lot of questions. In other words, there's a lot of interaction required for children to learn well. And that's only possible in a small group. There's a lot in learning that's only possible in a small group. When I say small group, I mean single figures or less than 10. They need feedback and guidance on their learning, not just scores in tests. And again, that kind of observing a child closely and noticing what are their learning needs, where have they progressed, that's only possible again in a small group. They need suitable practice resources, which are widely available and cheap. They need someone to turn to when they have questions, again, only really possible in a small group. And above all, they need your support, because you're more important than me when it comes to your child's education, as I hope you've figured out by now. You need someone to educate and guide you, which is what I'm doing here today, in how to support your child's learning. I am at your service for that. Now, I did say English is the only thing in 11+ that's complex. So I need to then also address that. How do you improve your mastery of English? Well, what children can do, number one, enjoy daily reading from a variety of sources, a total of at least 30 minutes, preferably an hour a day when there's no school. Reading is free. Most people won't tell you this, most tutors won't tell you this, that the actual large amount of personal reading, daily reading, and varied too, is actually more important than any course, including my course. And I think my 11+ course is the best course there is because I work hard to make it so. But without the large amount of personal daily reading, all the other preparation children do is futile because they're lacking, they're not addressing the most important skill. that's being tested. So lots of daily reading, good variety of it. They should enjoy that. It shouldn't become a chore, by the way. It should be a joy. Mixture of fiction and non-fiction, different genres, different authors. If you're talking about fiction, vary the non-fiction too, encyclopedias, newspapers, magazine, internet articles, and so on. Insist that your child speaks in sentences, express themselves clearly and accurately, and don't finish their sentences for them. Now, you don't have to turn into a complete bore, but from time to time, just get your child to do that. It's important because children might understand English very well, but then when it comes to expressing themselves, they haven't had enough practice at it. Because when they're speaking at home, you don't need them to finish their sentences. You don't need them to speak properly because you understand. When they're in school, most of the speaking they do is not with their teachers. It is in fact with their school friends. And it's the same situation. They don't need to speak properly. They don't need to finish their sentences because amongst friends, you just are understood without having to do that. As a result of which they don't, or they have hardly any practice at all at expressing themselves well. And then when it comes to things like creative writing, they find it really, really hard because they're not accustomed to finding just the right words to express themselves well. Learn words in context as far as possible in order to better appreciate their usage and meanings. In other words, don't learn from a vocabulary list. If somebody gives you a vocabulary list and says, go away and learn these words, shred it, please, or burn it, better still, because they're not doing you a service. They're doing you and your child a great disservice. Children should learn words when they come across them during the course of their personal reading. And importantly, learn the dictionary habit, because that's where you learn words, their meanings, and many words do have multiple meanings. What is the English spelling and what is the American spelling? What is the British usage? What's the American usage, and so on? That it's the dictionary that will tell you that, not what people around you are using or what you're reading. And you, that is mom and dad, you could develop your English and vocabulary. After all, if it's good enough for mom and dad, in other words, your kid's going to look at you and say, oh, Mom, you're always telling me reading is so important, but I never see you reading. So it can't be that important. And if it's good enough for you, that's good enough for me. So you really do need to be a good role model of learning, reading, mind management, and a growth mindset. You can't get away with, do as I say, not as I do. If you do want your child to believe in persevering with efforts to learn, let them see a worthy example, i.e. you. You must persevere with your efforts to learn. There are always things we can learn. So choosing tuition, look for these things. Tuition should optimize learning, not testing, and not practice. The group has to be small, 10 or less, so that your child can interact, the tutor can identify, address, and communicate individual learning needs, and you too can support their learning when you know how. The tutor marks some homework, which we do, because that adds to our understanding of your child's progress and learning needs. And ask, everybody says they're good. Nobody goes into business saying we're rubbish, but do they back that up with a money back guarantee? I do. And in my industry, as far as I know, I am the only one who does. Choosing tuition, run a mile if, meaning these are red flags. If you see these things, think, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. If they pack more than 12 people in a room, that isn't about education, that's about profit. If they give a pre-test before accepting pupils, they're essentially saying, your child had better already have the knowledge and skills because we're not going to add a lot. The tutor does not mark any homework. That too is about money. You do not have access to the learning. So in other words, your child goes to class, they learn, apparently, they were taught something, apparently, they come home and then they're supposed to do their work and you never had access to the learning because you weren't in the lesson. Remember I mentioned I teach the entire syllabus on my courses and you have access to my teaching. I record myself doing it. The focus is on testing or practice instead of learning or volume of work rather than quality of work. They stoke up hype about exam techniques and test scores and CEM. In other words, they're feeding your chimp, taking your eye off the ball so that you don't notice the fact that they're not actually teaching your child. A little plug, for my courses. Our courses are based on the values and insights shared in this presentation. We use highly interactive small group format. We work to optimize our collaboration with you. You have access 24/7 to your child's scores, to feedback, to my teaching and various documents. My flagship 11+ course is so effective, it comes back with a money-back guarantee. The foundation course is an excellent stepping stone to the 11+ course, and live lessons are running in Feltham, Hounslow, Cranford, Langley, Slough, and at a computer near you. So in other words, wherever in the country you are. And we do have people from all over the country, including Manchester, Sheffield, Swansea, Bristol, Hampshire, Kent, Essex, London, Birmingham, Leicester, all parts of the country. Children in all parts of the country are benefiting from this program. So live lessons, as opposed to video lessons, live lessons, that's a small group with a tutor, can be accessed via Zoom or in a room. Now, if you happen to live in the areas I mentioned, Feltham, Hounslow, West Middlesex generally, Slough, Langley, we do run lessons in venues there. So if you're within striking distance of those, you have the room option. If you're further afield, really, you have the Zoom option. But what's the difference? Well, it's the same course, it's the same lesson. And the live lesson makes up about, at best, at most, 20% of the work. The other 80% is the same for everybody. Pupils can participate in live lessons, LLs, in a room or via Zoom. It's the same lesson either way. But what's the difference? Well, Zoom is obviously more convenient and it's safer because your child's at home and you don't have to travel and they don't have to get dressed and you don't have to put on your shoes. You don't have to get in your car. You don't have to drive. You don't have to negotiate the traffic, parking, and so on. You save time, you save money. And they are better for children who feel vulnerable away from home. Room, well, it's more bother for you, but the tutor gets greater scrutiny of the children and their work. And there are fewer potential distractions. And they are better for children with concentration issues. And you save money by the Zoom option also because it costs us less and therefore it costs you less. Okay, so sometimes I get this question. So since 11+ is straightforward and my program is so effective, why doesn't every pupil pass? Well, I think you know the answer to that, but the key to it is this. That's what the test is for. It's a selection test. By definition, you can't have every child passing the selection test. The test spreads the children out in terms of their scores. And then they set the pass mark so that only about the top quarter pass. So by definition, about 3/4 of children don't get to pass. And not every child can be in that top quarter, no matter how hard they work. Sometimes they just had poor mind management skills and just couldn't knuckle down to, they had all the opportunities in front of them, but they just were driven by their chimps and didn't do enough work. Fixed mindset, they or their parents, or more likely both, were looking at scores rather than learning. Lack of a foundation, they never really learned the basics. They didn't develop their mastery of English. They didn't understand the most basic concepts in numbers and so on. Lack of a foundation. Lack of parental support and involvement is not a criticism of parents. I totally appreciate that many parents are working really hard. Sometimes both parents are working really hard, long hours, in order to make ends meet and just do not have the opportunity. And in some cases, they don't have the education to support their children. But certainly those children who are fortunate enough that their parents have the education and the opportunity, they do benefit from that in terms of their academic learning. Sometimes they just had a bad day. Everything else was right, but they just didn't perform on the day for a million reasons that you may never know. And ultimately, grammar school is wrong for them, and that is a positive result. So whether, if a child has prepared thoroughly for grammar school, they sit the exam. If they pass, good for them. Maybe they'll get to a grammar school. If they don't pass, good for them. They missed out on something that would have been a terrible experience for them. So it's a result both ways. And that way you don't react in this childish, ridiculous way of, oh no, you failed, and stigmatize your child. back then to the questions. So this is nearing the end of my presentation. The questions to ask if you were worried about your child's education. I think you probably answered them for yourself by now, but the first question, do you equate schooling and education? No, because a good 90% plus of education is in the home, and schooling itself is only a part of that remaining 10%. And therefore, you really need to pay attention to the 90% and worry a little less about the other less than 10%. Do you measure educational success in grades, points, scores, and awards? In other words, external measures, external outcomes, in which case, if you adopt a growth mindset, you won't be doing that. You'll be measuring your child's education success in terms of what they learn, the efforts that they make. Are you aware of making important decisions using shaky criteria? Well, guess what? It's not you making those decisions, it's your chimp. So this is mind management. If you're aware of your chimp, and when the chimp is making the decisions, you can actually do something about it. Are you an asset or an obstacle to your child's education? Well, if you're aware about mind management, mindset, and a healthy perspective, well, you're probably an asset. But if you answered no to those questions, or rather, if you answered no to those questions, you're probably an asset. If you weren't aware, you're probably meaning well, but inadvertently undermining your child. You're an obstacle. That's why education for parents is so important. Do you see a connection between the above questions? Well, this is the bottom line. This is the, if you like, the ultimate big message. Yes, you need not worry about your child's education because it's actually in your hands. That is your hands and your child's hands. It isn't about the school. It isn't about the university. And if you're worried, well, maybe it's because you don't know what are the right things to do. And I've tried to shed light on that today with the Pyramid of Flourishing. So in summary, flourishing requires effective mind management and a growth mindset, and a health perspective of 50-40-10. Give due attention to the overwhelmingly important role of child and parents and the relative insignificance of schooling and tuition. I didn't mention this before, but there's something I call the 3 L's: logic, language, and a love of learning. If your child has those things, they're going to flourish no matter where they go. And if they lack those things, they're not going to flourish no matter where they go. They are prerequisites for 11+, and they're prerequisites for flourishing academically. Choose small group tuition if you haven't already chosen it. That prioritize engagement and learning rather than hype and testing if you're in the position of choosing tuition. Now you can book now for the current courses, which are the 2021/22, because they start in 2021 and finish in 2022. There's the 11+ course, which is for children who are now in year 5, and the foundation course, which is for children who are now in year 4. Our live lessons are in small, highly interactive groups. There is coaching for you as well as your child. You have access to 100% of the syllabus teaching by yours truly, by video lesson. You have 24/7 access to that teaching, to performance records, to the schedule of work, and to the individual learning plan, ILP we call it. You have someone to turn to for help, whatever kind of a query you have to do with 11+. We have a proven record, as I mentioned. The company was 20 years old in April, and our program is driven by values, values-driven program, not by profit. What's not to like? We have an autumn offer, which you should be aware of, and mention to your friends, that if your child has missed the beginning of the course, we will waive the charge for worksheets and video lessons so that they can catch up for free. So in other words, all the video lessons and worksheets that were issued before you join, we will throw them in for free, because using the video lessons and the worksheets, your child can actually catch up on the units, the syllabus units that they have missed. Of course, it takes time and effort, But guess what? There's a holiday coming up, the end of year break, the Christmas New Year break. And what a great opportunity for late joiners to the course to catch up. So you can email us. We used to have a phone number. We don't have that anymore. But you email us and we'll help you as much as we can. You can secure your child's place on one of our courses. You can book a free Zoom call with me. You can qualify for the autumn offer, which I just mentioned in the previous slide. You can give your child the chance to catch up on missed learning over the holidays if you join before that. Now, if you like some of the things that I've said, the way we do things, the way we think, then don't keep a good thing to yourself, spread the word, tell your friends and relations about us and about our values-based education, it's about children's flourishing, it's not about grammar schools. Give us a mention as well in your social media if you use them. We are not run for the purpose of accumulating profit, but to provide the best possible education and guidance that we can. And I hope that matters to you, because it certainly matters to me. I have an end thought, which is every parent has the chance to make the world a better place by the example they set for their children. What's the alternative? And if that's not what you're doing, what are you doing? That concludes my presentation. And the next step will be question and answer. Any questions at all, please? Okay, there are a couple of hands up at the moment, so I'm going to take the one that's at the top and unmute you, and it says Cheryl. So I'm going to enable you to speak, Cheryl. So please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello, yeah.
Please.
Just my question is like, we live in West London, so we are nearer to Slough or Kingston.
Right.
So whatever my child is taking a tuition, is it support for both the places of the grammar tests? Grammar schools.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Thank you for asking that question. What I'll do is I'll address that question fully and explain to others who might not be familiar. I'll disable talking for a moment. Okay. What Cheryl just asked me is that they live in West London and that the grammar schools in Slough and in Kingston are the ones which are sort of within striking distance, and does the course prepare children for the exams for those schools? And the answer is yes. Now, this actually is a wider question. What I mentioned earlier is that we have children from all over the country, and I named a number of cities and counties that children are on the course from. And they are actually various exams. There are at least 3 different exam setters, which is CSSE, CEM, and GL. Don't worry about what those letters stand for. They're just organizations that set 11+ tests, and there are others too. And children on the course have sat exams for various setters. There are some children who have sat exams for all 3 setters, and they've excelled in all the exams, because the course does prepare children for all 11+ tests, because they're all testing the same things, primarily literacy, and then numeracy, and then some of them, not all of them, include spatial reasoning or non-verbal reasoning. Some do and some don't. And the exam for Slough, that is the Slough Consortium, is set by the company called CEM. Whereas the exam for Tiffin in Kingston is set by GL. Well, actually, they don't say that, but children who've done the test tell me that it's similar to GL practice papers. And yes, the course prepares children for all 11+ tests around the country, not only the ones in Slough and Kingston. Having said that, most grammar schools do not test creative writing, and therefore it isn't part of the 11+ course. But what I do is, because there are a number of schools do test creative writing, I include that as an optional workshop, and I run that several times a year. So Kingston, I mentioned that because Tiffin School in Kingston is one of those schools that does test creative writing. And so children who are going to sit for tiffin, you should put them in for the creative writing workshop, which is 5 3-hour sessions that I personally teach. And they tend to take place during school holidays when our normal 11 plus course lessons are not running. Okay, so the course teaches the children the literacy, the numeracy, and the spatial reasoning required for all 11 plus tests, and the creative writing needed for some schools is available as an optional workshop during some school holidays. I'm now going to re-enable you to speak. If you would like to follow on from that, or did I address your question fully, madam? I think I did. Okay, now the next person with the hand up is, the name on my screen is Ambuj. So I'm going to allow you to speak. So please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask.
Hi, good morning, Sir Tailor. Thanks a lot for this very interesting session. My question is similar to the somewhat previous question, although not exactly the same.
Okay.
This course is mainly for grammar school exams for 11 plus. Yes, but is there a similarity in the exam pattern for private schools as well with this 11 plus grammar school exam?
Thank you very much for asking that question. What I'll do is I'll mute you again and address that question as fully as I can. Okay. The question is, yes, the course is primarily aimed at the grammar school 11 plus tests and not the private school tests, because private schools also have an entrance exam and they do call it the 11 plus or the common entrance test. But there are a couple of differences, and let me try and get it clear. The way in which my 11 plus course is aimed at the grammar schools is because the grammar school 11 plus tests take place in the autumn term. Most of them, in fact, take place in September, and some take place in October. And some schools, they have a second stage, like Tiffin is one of those. They have a second stage test that takes place in November. In fact, Tiffin girls had their stage 2 test only yesterday, and Tiffin boys had their stage 2 test only on Friday. But the majority of the tests take place in September. And for that reason, the 11 plus course finishes in the first week of September. The 11 plus course is designed to bring the children to their peak just in time for the tests. So the tests begin in early September, and the course also finishes in early September. So the timing of the course is for the grammar school entrance tests. Now, this is important because the private schools, they don't have their tests, their selection tests in the autumn term. They have their selection tests in January, so the spring term, so it's later. And so even if children have done my 11 plus course and they, learned the numeracy and the literacy and they're very skilled at it, their course will have finished in early September. And then the entrance tests for private schools doesn't take place till January, so it's 4 months later, by which time, of course, they've had the chance to really go off the boil. And those children need to work hard during the Christmas, New Year holiday. It's not really a holiday for them because they've got the exam in January. So they need to get themselves back up to their best in time for a January test. So the timing is different, and that's important. Now, as for the content, well, that's not so different because almost all private schools, they tend to test creative writing. That's a thing that private schools tend to do more often than grammar schools. But of course, that is available, and children, that's a reasonably easy skill to learn, actually. That's why I do it in 5 3-hour workshops, 3-hour sessions. And they do tend to test numeracy. They tend not to test the spatial ability, the nonverbal reasoning, but some private schools do. So they do vary in the subjects they include, but they are still primarily testing literacy and numeracy and spatial ability. So they are testing the same knowledge and the same skills. But as I mentioned, they tend to give a little more importance to creative writing and use it more widely. But there's another element to private schools, and that is that almost all private schools also include an interview as part of their selection process. And we do not prepare children for interview. That is a specialist thing, and you'd need to go to somebody who knows about preparing children for interviews, and maybe parents too, for that purpose. So in terms of content, the children learn everything they need on my course, the 11 plus course, because the same content is being tested, the same knowledge and same skills, but the timing is different. The private school exams take place about 4 months after the end of the 11 plus course, and it is likely that they need to be prepared for an interview in which we would not be able to assist. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Super. Thank you for asking that. Okay, now the next hand that's up is from Aisha. Aisha, I'm just going to enable you to speak so you can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, my question is around the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. What things, can you give some tips as a parent, what we can say to our children in terms of, because I know this might impact a lot of parents. Obviously, we want our children to do well. And I sometimes struggle a lot to use the correct words. So for example, if my child is not understanding something, getting something, I know it's not their fault because they haven't learnt it. But I struggle when it comes to saying something to them or wording in such a way that, I don't employ the fixed mindset, but that I'm, that it's not a bad thing that they've got it right, that they've got it wrong. It's not bad that they made a mistake. But I guess, what things can you say to a child to encourage them as opposed to demotivating them and lowering their self-esteem? Because I think as parents, we all do that. Like, we don't realize we're doing it. But when they're having conversations with others, they'll say, oh, mum said this to me. And it really impacts them mentally.
Yeah, you're so right, madam. You're so right. And thank you very much for asking this question. And I will now try to address that the best I can. Okay, number one is I can give you a few tips. Some of the things have already been mentioned, but I'll sum them up. But the best tip I can give you is read this book, because this is a really important and useful tool for parents to have, because you will learn a lot about how you can shape your mindset, or your mindset, but also your child's mindset to a more constructive, more useful thing. Okay, so I would say read this book. Now I will mention a few very simple things. I'll pick up on one of the things that you said, madam, which was that you want your child to do well. Now I would change that, because your child will hear you say, I want you to do well, and unless you say otherwise, they're going to think that means scores and passing and grades and awards and position in a race and that kind of thing. And that, because in the wider culture, that is what is recognized as doing well. So somebody has a lot of money, a flashy car, going on fancy holidays, you say, oh, they're doing well. Do you see? Somebody gets lots of A stars. They're all numbers now, I know, in GCSEs, but they get lots of A stars and you say, oh, they did well. So doing well is, in the wider society, measured by external outcomes. And unless you redefine that for your child, that's what they're going to think. That's how you're going to evaluate. And that reinforces a fixed mindset in them. So what I would say, rather than I want you to do well, is I would say, I would like you to learn well. That's a completely different thing. Because what you're doing is you're taking from measuring well using external outcomes to well with an internal outcome, something that happens in their mind, the learning, because learning happens in the brain. So all you do is take the language which suggests or reinforces measuring success or doing well by external outcomes and turn it into the processes, the effort. And that's it. It's as simple as that. But it means looking at the way that a child might interpret your words in the context of culture, because of course they're not in isolation with you at home, they're exposed to society as a whole. And when you say doing well, that's what they're going to register, the external measures of their success, rather than the things that are actually within their control, which is the effort that they make. So in order to encourage a child to do well, learn well, I would say, make a schedule, follow the schedule, do it the way that your tutor is telling you to do it. When you make a mistake, wow, embrace it as a learning opportunity. Because if you never make a mistake, you probably aren't learning a lot either. And if you make it about learning, you say, oh, wow, fantastic, I made that mistake. Wow, let me see where I went wrong. What did I do wrong here? What was it that I lacked? I lacked something. I lacked a piece of knowledge, or I lacked a particular skill. And so we teach children to embrace mistakes, and we say, oh, mistakes are your friends. Mistakes are learning opportunities. So, and then, so that's, you turn doing well and success from, and you have to work at this, because the default that we grow up with, and the default that is in society at large, is measuring doing well and success by external outcomes, which reinforces a fixed mindset in people as a whole. And you have to actively work against that. So you have to be ultra conscious that you are not reinforcing the same message, but in fact that you're helping your child to rise above that, because it is a nonsense that's out there. It's all about commerciality and turning us into consumers and all that. So that's the one thing. And you are right, madam, you pinpointed the way we use language. We have to be very aware of the choices of words and how they might be reinforcing the wrong message. And we want to actively work at the right message. And I think you'll get some help from that book. The other thing which was mentioned in one of the video clips was about praise. Don't praise your child for having done well, for having come first, for getting a high score, or for getting them all right. Praise them for the effort that they put into studying. So there's nothing wrong with getting a high score. There's nothing wrong with getting them all right. And there's nothing wrong with coming first. But don't praise them for the score, and don't praise them for the position. Praise them for the efforts that they have made. Do you see? So it's what you praise. Don't praise the outcome, praise the process. Because then what you're valuing is not the outcome, you're valuing the process. And if you value the process, your child will want to follow that process more, because that's what you value. You see? And you can't really fake it. You have to embrace it yourself. And once you embrace it, then it becomes much easier to practice it too. Because if it's there in your heart, then if you like, you will automatically rethink your wording. You'll automatically rethink the perspective that you're bringing. And you'll find that, oh, over time, you are actually changing the way you couch things and the way that the words that you use as well. And you'll find that this has an effect on your child, but it'll have an effect on you too. So it's not a quick, easy thing, because changing the way we use language is not an easy thing, but it is possible and it's doable over time. And we start with specific things. So in essence, I think I don't think I need to sum that up. I think I've repeated it a number of times within that answer. I think it's a start. I mean, you can't do it in one go. There's no switch you can flick, but there's something to be started with, madam. Okay, and get hold of this book if you can. It comes from America, and there's difficulty getting resources from America at the moment. But if you can get it, Mindset by Carol Dweck, that would be my top recommendation. Does that help you, madam?
Yes, thank you. That's excellent. Just on that book, Mindset, is that supplied as part of the course or not? Or can I just buy that online?
For any child who is on the 11+ course, we include this book as part of the kit. Not for the foundation course, but for the 11+ course.
That's fine.
But I would get it sooner rather than later, because you get it sooner, you can start making the difference sooner.
Absolutely. Thank you.
My child is in year 4 now. If I request a place now, is she get immediate place or do we need a waiting list?
Well, she's eligible now for the foundation course. So it's possible for her to join the foundation course now, but you can't apply now for the 11 plus course. The reason is because we normally start taking bookings for the 11 plus course from about April. So, you know, it's a while away yet, and we only plan those in the spring term. So we start the planning process in February and we finalize it around March. And then we start taking bookings in April. So it's only in April that we open up bookings for next year's courses. So at the moment, it's not possible to make a booking, but you can certainly give us your details so that whenever we send out any kind of messages, and we do send out a message when we're about to open up bookings, just to notify those people who are interested, and you can certainly be on that list. So you can't make the booking for the 11 plus course, but you can be on our mailing list. You can make a booking now for the foundation course. And if I may just give a little plug for the foundation course. The foundation course is exactly what it says. It is a foundation and it is preparation for the 11 plus course. 11 plus itself is not hard. I tried to make that very clear during the presentation. Most of it is really simple. Children just need to be taught well. And I personally do all the teaching via video lesson of the syllabus. And so I try to keep it as simple and as clear as I possibly can. So 11 plus is simple. What is hard, I've said it and I'll say it again, is the English. And it's also the mind management and mindset. Now, when children are on the foundation course, they are, by the way that the course is structured, by the processes involved, the procedures involved, they're, if you like, getting accustomed to organizing themselves and practicing good mind management, practicing good discipline, you know, it's another way of saying it, and also embracing a growth mindset, because this idea of mind management and a growth mindset, these are built into our programs. And so when children have contact with our programs, they, both the children and the parents, have the opportunity to get into the swing of good mind management and a growth mindset. So it's not just the subject matter that the children learn, which is at a basic level in year 4. It's a foundation level. In a way, the more important things children learn on the foundation course is organizing themselves, adopting the growth mindset, getting into good routines for getting their work done, learning how to plan, how to improve their plan, taking an interest in reading, in developing their vocabulary and such things. So it's more about the habits that children learn than the actual subject matter that the children learn. And so the foundation course is literally a foundation for the 11 plus course in more ways than just the subject matter. Thank you very much for asking that question. Now, somebody put a message in the chat and I didn't get a chance quite to read it. So I'm going to have a quick glance at it now because that might be something that we can discuss as well. Okay, we've got a Hardik who's asked, I will add you to the waiting list, Hardik. The video recording of this event will be available probably tomorrow on YouTube and on the company's website. And we don't have any venues in Buckinghamshire now. We used to use Burnham Library, and we tried one in High Wycombe where I live, but there weren't enough people who were interested to make it viable. So unfortunately, we don't have a centre in Buckinghamshire right now, but we do have a lot of people from Buckinghamshire who do our courses. Some of them go to the venue in Slough. We use the Copthorne Hotel in Slough, which is right on the M4. And of course, there are many who access our courses, the live lessons via Zoom. I'm going to end it here. So I thank you again for attending today. And, you know, if you like what we do and our philosophy, our values, please do tell other people about us. It isn't all about hype and it isn't all about money. It is all about children's flourishing. So I hope we can be of service to you and your child. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and I hope to meet you someday soon. Bye-bye.